Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special episode of the Fantasy Fiends podcast. I've just been told this is episode 69, so you know it's going to be good.
I totally should not have said that. I should have said we were on episode 70, and you could have just avoided all of this.
Hey, baby, 69 only comes around once, once in a podcast. Steven's like, "What did I get myself into?" So we are here with. I'm Stevie Collier, and I'm here.
Actually, what I'm thinking is that the whole point of 69 is it comes around more than once.
Oh man, yes, we're gonna have a good podcast today.
Yeah, just like our guest last week, Tassanja, she's like just right off the bat going inappropriate with this. Is awesome.
Well, I think we were talking about female armpit hair last time.
So. Exactly. So
nothing. So I'm Stevie Collier. I'm here with my co-host Andy Peliquin, and today we have the honor of having Stephen Pearl with us today, and we're doing something very new with the Fantasy Fiends podcast. We're going to be talking about mysticism. So please introduce yourself, Stephen.
Well, hi everybody. I'm Stephen B. Pearl. The B is so it's easy to find me on the internet. And I've written several novels across the speculative fiction field, and I've studied the metaphysical sciences since the time I was 15, so 50 years now.
Wow.
Sorry,
40 years now. 40. Oh boy.
You've been studying metaphysics.
Metaphysics, yes.
Which is what the law of attraction is under, right?
Yeah, well, the occultists coined the law of attraction long before the term metaphysics came up. I guess you call it metaphysics if you're trying to be hoi polloi and look highbrow.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense. I follow a lot of people who call themselves metaphysicians, like Dr. Joe Vitale, Bob Proctor. They all call themselves metaphysicians. And I've read a book on metaphysics, but it had nothing to do with the law of attraction. So I'd be interested to see what your definition of metaphysics is.
Well, it's a fancy way of things saying basically mysticism, the occult.
Okay.
The occult. Well, occult is a very inaccurate term because the occult means the unknown, and in truth, it's any of the mystery schools, any of the New Age. It all falls under the blanket of metaphysics. It's a very general term. Things that go bump in the night.
That, to me, I know it's not probably scary to you, but stuff like that creeps me out, which is why I'm so interested in it. I'm a big believer in ghosts, apparitions, spirits. I believe in that stuff. I don't have a very organized opinion on it, because I know I don't know who to believe. There's so many, I feel like so many different beliefs on the subject. And I feel like at 26 years old, I'm still taking in information from people like you and making my own opinions on it.
That's the best way to do it. I mean, I can tell you what my life experience and what my studies have led me to, but ultimately you're the judge of your own reality. I mean, I grew up in a haunted house.
What? Did you really?
Oh, yes. We called her MMA.
God. That's a ghost name right there.
Yeah. Well, she had been the lady who owned the house prior to us purchasing it. She had died in the house. And she just hadn't transitioned to the other side. She was very fond of children, very protective of children, and thought my parents were kind of twits.
So I'm guessing she messed with them a little bit, maybe.
I didn't mess with them so much, more or less just tried to be a comforting influence for the kids. She's a very positive entity.
Were you scared?
Well, at times. I mean, there was this one time, it was about 3 a.m. I had gotten up, I had to go to the bathroom. I was in my teens at the time, too.
Oh.
And I walked out. And I happened to walk by the original part of the house because the house had been built onto over the years. And I looked to the side and I just saw this old woman's face.
Oh, God.
Floating at about eye level. And she looked very old, very gray. And you have to remember, I had just woken up. I was going to the can, and I wasn't awake. And I just sort of screamed and leapt. And then I turned around and she was gone. My father came out and said, "What the hell? What's this noise?" I said, I told him what I saw. And for once, my father just sort of looked at me and nodded and said, "Don't worry about it." And went back to bed.
That's a really good. Was she ugly? Was she scary looking?
No, she's just old.
Oh, that gave me chills. Ah, man. I grew up with two people who swore they've seen ghosts, and I can tell somebody who's lying about the ghosts and who's actually telling the truth. And the people who tell the truth speak of it without excitement, and it's always just matter of factly. It's like, yeah, I saw it, and I think about it a lot. And actually, one of them is my mom. And it was not a positive experience for her. But my grandma, she had a relationship with the lady who died in her house, and and both her and my grandpa saw this ghost. It was a woman in a wedding dress, and it was a woman who'd lived there and died in the house as well. And they'd seen her multiple times, and they told my brother and I not to go upstairs because that's where she was, and she didn't like loud noises or anything, so we never went upstairs. I never wanted to anyway. So
well, the wedding dress is very telling because you tend to get hauntings linked to peak emotional experiences.
Really? Okay.
Because there's a lot more psychic energy when your emotions are fully engaged. And the whole thing of dealing with regrets is another thing that's wormed its way into traditional, into ghost story literature, but it's not completely inaccurate.
Well, I have a ton of questions, and I know Andy does probably too. First, I actually want to plug your book, Horn of the Kraken, and can you tell us a little bit about that? Because we'll be reading from it today.
Okay, Horn of the Kraken is a Norse fantasy Viking adventure.
Cool.
And it begins during Ragnarok, the Norse apocalypse. So the world has been cast into complete cold and dark. Against this backdrop, the historical conflict between Jarl Eric Bloodaxe and his bastard half-brother Hakon still rages. That's over the throne of Norwich. Hakon has obtained the Horn of the Kraken, which allows him to summon Kraken from the depths of the ocean to attack Jarl Eric's shipping. Jarl Eric counters by sending a group of heroes to steal the horn from Hakon's compound. And I kind of bill it as Lord of the Rings meets Ocean's 11, which
Ocean's 11? I can't picture it. So is it like a heist?
Yeah, it's a heist in the 900s.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, it's something I never would have thought about. Andy, are you still with us?
I still am, just listening and absorbing all the information.
It seems I could never write something like that because I'm so ignorant to Norse mythology. I've just kind of pushed away from any sort of historical fantasy because I feel like I don't know enough about it. I feel like I would have to really do a bunch of research before I dove into something like that.
Well, I had a couple of things going for me. One, I was a member of the SCA for 9 years. Society for Creative Anachronism. The crazy people dress up in armor and hit each others with sticks.
I actually am part of that as well.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I don't go anymore because they're too far away from me. But I had a fatherly figure in my life who did that, and he was knighted actually, which is it's probably to me and you it's super cool, huh?
Yeah, I mean he must be a good fighter. I know the basics of broadsword, epee, and sword and shield.
It hurts too. It hurts really badly.
Yeah, but at least we're not the guys. I'm sorry. Guys who fight with live steel, I have a bit of an issue with that.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh, yeah. There's groups that use live steel as opposed to rattan swords. And I just think they're ignoring the fact that these were weapons of war that were supposed to kill you. So it's not a sporting event when you're using live steel.
I think we have a USA team. Andy, have you heard of them?
I haven't.
Yeah, there's like a U.S. team, Scottish team. Actually, yeah. Now that you've mentioned, I think I have heard of these people, and they wear like chainmail, right? And then they just go into a field and have at it with judges or something.
Yep.
Oh
And
my god.
there's also people who do jousting. The Knights of Valor are a jousting group in this area, and one of their number, I think he's top ranked in the world. At least he was about 4 years ago.
Wow.
Wait, where are you at right now?
I'm in Hamilton, Ontario. Look
Okay,
for Lake Ontario on a map and go to the extreme western tip.
we have a real jousting team near me, and they do full-on jousting, and it is the funnest, the most cool thing I've ever seen in my life, but I can't believe how dangerous it is. It is extremely dangerous.
Oh yeah, there's no way to protect yourself getting knocked off a horse at 30 kilometers, 50 kilometers an hour. Sorry.
It's even more brutal than A Knight's Tale makes it out to be. I mean, it's just raw smacking. It's it, and the crowd is a bunch of modern humans, right? And they're acting like wild animals when this is going on, me included. Yeah, kill him, bloodthirsty.
Yeah, humans haven't changed. That's part of what makes fantasy work. Sorry.
So Andy, do you want to just jump right? Oh, Andy, anything cool happened to you this week? Because I have something cool.
Well, I found out that Marvel is going to be releasing a TV show about a Loki TV show.
Yep.
And a Scarlet Witch TV show. Both characters that I really enjoy. And then that's right after watching the Captain Marvel trailer. So I am quite excited for what's ahead for comic book lovers like me.
The Scarlet Witch I could get into.
I'm surprised you're not into Loki, which would be more Norse, though, wouldn't it?
Well, I know a fair bit about the Norse, and I also, because the Horn of the Kraken was set in the role-playing universe of the Fate of the Norns Ragnarok role-playing game, they commissioned me to write the book. And it's a very historically accurate, well, anthropologically accurate Norse role-playing game.
What is it called again?
Fate of the Norns Ragnarok.
Cool. Thank you. You just seem like the most interesting person ever. We're gonna get into ghost busting, which I didn't even know was a real thing. And now you've been commissioned to write a fantasy tabletop role-playing game book. We should grab some coffee sometime. Andy, you know what? I never asked. Andy, do you believe in ghosts?
I believe in the possibility of ghosts existing, but I wouldn't say that I've seen one personally.
Yeah.
So
you seem open-minded.
Yeah, my new series has a character who can see spirits. And it's explained to her by her father. They're basically shamans. They call the spirit whisperers. And basically, it's like energy, right? The soul is energy.
Okay, yeah.
Electricity, like in this case, they call it lightning because they don't understand electricity. But so it's this spark of energy that is never truly destroyed. It simply changes from one form to another, like physics. Matter is never destroyed; it simply changes or it's displaced or whatever. Yeah. So that's what they are. These spirits, they are simply the spark of life of the people whose lives were snuffed out before their time. They're still alive. They're still tethered to some place that's important to them, whether it's one of the ghosts. She's tethered to the windowsill where she carved a heart and her name and someone else's name into the stone. Or people are another ghost is tied to the location, her daughter's favorite place in the garden. So it's these things, these strong emotional attachments, like Stephen was saying, that's sort of what causes these things to happen, what causes them to remain. And so this character has the ability to speak to and control, and actually she basically does force lightning, but using the energy she collects from the spirits that she absorbs. And so it's sort of this a combination of sort of the Mexican reverence for the dead, that the spirits, they can actually come back and speak to their families on the Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead. Combine that with African belief of the ancestors and their reverence for the ancestors, with, of course, force lightning, because it's just such an awesome visual ability.
Yeah. That actually runs very close to the view of the Sethkona, the necromantic witch of the Norse,
Okay.
who they could communicate with spirits, and nowadays we'd call them mediums. You know,
Okay.
very little different. But you know, you have this phenomena across the world now. Of course, whenever I'm discussing ghosts, I like to point out there are several things that have been lumped under the term ghost. The simplest is the astral or ethereal impression, where if you hear a weird scampering sound, it's the cat's going crazy.
Right.
The astral or ethereal impression, where an action has been repeated time and time and time again, and it has literally pushed an energy pattern into the matter of that area. There was a case in England that's fairly famous where people would see a legionnaire going back and forth, always along the same path, but they would only ever see him from the hips up. They excavated, and at a little under a meter down, they found an old Roman road.
Oh, wow.
This was the guys who patrolled Hadrian's Wall.
Oh,
And
wow.
they just kept going back and forth and back and forth. And they did it so much, it impressed onto the ethereal plane at that level.
Was that somehow tied to the Lost Legion, or is that totally different?
That's totally different.
Okay.
Then you have the next, which is a spirit that when the person died, the spirit refused to transit. It was scared. It ran away from the white light, and the light only stays open for so long. Or there was a clerical error and the light didn't come at all. They happen. It's a big, complex system. So they're stuck floating around, clinging to what remains of their life, what energy remains in their surroundings.
Okay.
Then you have other ghosts who consciously chose not to go over. And they can be the ones that are nasty because normally they're scared stiff of going over and weren't very nice people in the first place.
So when they die, are they usually like angry people when they die? And then that's...
Well, yeah, that. And also fear is a great motivator. If you don't want to go across by an act of will, you don't have to go across. You can maroon yourself here. And some spirits do.
So 2 questions real quick. Do we have a choice to do that? Does everybody have a choice to make that decision, in your opinion?
If they have the emotional, it basically comes down to how much emotional energy there is at the time to run away from the white light. Or you may choose not to run away from the white light. I mean, most people don't. Most people are quite happy to go where they belong.
So my next question before you go on, a reason to be afraid to cross this path? Are you afraid of the judgment that you might receive?
Yeah, that tends to be it.
Okay.
Religions that have a vengeful aspect, that, you know, I'm going to be punished for the horrible things I've done, or I'm going to be punished for things that aren't that horrible, but I think they're horrible because my religion tells me they're horrible. Mm-hmm. Those can be they're a right breeding ground for ghosts. And the final category of ghosts, well, of human ghosts, are called visitors. And they're spirits that can pop back to the earth plane and transit between the planes at will. Normally, they go to places that they were familiar with in life because they're comfortable and they're visiting and they want to check up on things. I had one of those in the house that I'm in now. She had lived her entire adult life in this house. And she wanted to check up that the house was being taken care of and to see that it was all tickety-boo. Unfortunately, she smoked, and I won't permit that in my home, and I won't permit it in my home by spirits. So we had words.
What? So Andy, if you have any questions, man, jump in because I could talk ghosts all day.
Yeah, do it, man.
Okay. I feel like since you're so much more open to it, that you see them more. You're more aware of it. You're more consciously aware of these spirits. Do you believe that's true, or do you believe everyone could have these experiences and you just got lucky?
No, I think I was open to it in part because I was raised in the haunted house.
Okay.
In part because my family has a long history of having some psychic ability. And
Okay. Yeah.
in large part because I've spent, as I said, I've studied since I was 15. I've meditated since I was 15. I've spent a lifetime opening myself up to this other reality, which is parallel to our own.
Meditation is surprisingly third eye opening. See what I did there? I started meditating at 23 and couldn't believe how much it changed my life, and really opened my eyes to just, it's hard to explain, and nothing I want to get into now, but you brought up being, psychic and having these tendencies. That is the one thing that I am surprisingly, that and witches and stuff, those are the two things I'm actually afraid to dive into with my religion. I am Catholic, but I'm not a practicing Catholic. I see myself more as a Christian, but it does say in the Bible to stay away from the occult. But I've talked to a priest about it, and he said it's more of, going to see a psychic, believing in what the psychic says, and doing witch rituals like candle stuff. That is against God. And so I don't want to believe that, because I find it so fascinating that someone could be so connected to that kind of, I guess, energy force. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, number one, I have a lot of friends who identify as witches. I myself identify as pagan.
Okay.
And what it comes down to is witch is almost a useless term because it has so many divisions. But I'll address the various forms of pagan witchcraft, often called Wicca.
Wicca, okay. Is that the same thing as Santeria? Because I get them mixed up.
No, Santeria is a hybrid of Catholicism and African religion.
Is it evil? I mean, not evil, that's subjective, but is it negative?
No.
Okay.
It's what the practitioner makes of it.
Okay.
They do have a class of what we would call morally questionable practitioners. And then they have ones who are very benign and are primarily focused on healing and helping people ascend spiritually. When it comes to Wicca, the first rule of Wicca is, be it that thou harm none, do what thou wilt. So basically it says, do what you like as long as you don't hurt anybody.
Okay, yeah, because then you're you're diving into someone else's rights, right?
Right.
Okay.
Now, it's impossible to live up to that because no matter what you do, you're going to have some negative and positive impacts on people. But you try to live up to it, and hopefully by trying to live up to it, you're a better person. The other thing is, whatever you put into the life of another will be revisited upon your own, threefold good and threefold bad.
Could you repeat that, please?
Whatever you put into the life of another will be revisited upon your 3 times upon your own, threefold good and threefold bad.
That reminds me of a law of attraction practice of being generous, because what you give back tenfold is what I've heard.
Yeah, it's stating that same basic energy of like attracts like.
Okay.
Which is a standard of the mystical practices, and was actually, I believe, put in comes from the Hermetica.
Hermetica, I've never heard of that.
Quintessential book, probably mythological, but there's been several modern attempts to recreate it from the quotes of various people who are supposedly quoting it over the century and other works. It more or less maps out a metaphysical universe whereby the various planets are representative of energy fields that are expressed into our own plane of existence. And when you're practicing mystical practices, one of the main things is to know which energy field you're tapping into for what you do. Okay, you said you have a Catholic background.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
if you look at the saints, they form more or less a pantheon.
Interesting.
Because the various saints represent various aspects of life. And in a mystical practice, you would call on that particular saint that relates to the area of life that you're dealing with. Now, I'm not familiar with which saint is for what. That's not my area, but going to Egyptian, my wife is traveling right now. She's in England. And so I lit a candle to the god Anubis, jackal-headed god. He's the god of the dead, but he's also, well, the god of the traveler to the dead, but he's also the god of all travelers. So I was asking his blessing to keep her safe. And I was also, at the same time, basically a Catholic could do the same thing with St. Christopher, although I believe he's been defrocked or something.
I don't keep up with the saints. I know my grandma is huge into the saints. That's like her big thing. She knows everything about them. Like Saint Stephen. You probably know Saint Stephen, right?
No.
He's the first martyr. He was stoned to death. But okay, I have to ask you. Andy is probably more knowledgeable about this than I am. I just feel like he is. But what exactly is paganism? And what are you as a pagan?
Okay. You know, in high school, you probably did a segment on Greek mythology.
A little. I went to a Catholic high school, so no.
Okay. The gods that predated Christianity throughout Europe, there were pantheons, and pagans worship one or more of those pantheons.
Okay.
Myself, I'm Egyptian path. So the gods and goddesses of the Egyptian pantheon are the gods that represent the various forces of the universe to me.
Okay.
It's more or less the names that you call them by, but it's also a belief. Okay, again, for me, because it's very hard to pin down exactly what pagans agree on because we're so diverse. For me, a view that the universe itself is the body of God.
Okay.
And the God is the universe. And ultimately, what I call the gods and goddesses are roughly equivalent to things like nerve ganglion and endocrine glands that monitor and balance the metabolism of the greater deity.
Did you pick the Egyptian side, or is it by blood?
It picked me.
It picked you, okay. Yes. Through meditation, I'm guessing.
Well, I was meditating. I had been reading and studying for a little while, a couple of years. And I was meditating, and I felt a tap on my shoulder. I looked around, and I saw this really impressive hawk-headed man standing behind me. And he just looked at me and said, "You're mine." I said, "Okay. Is there anything else I should do?" "Read." "Okay. Anything else?" Dead silence, and he was gone.
How long were you meditating before you had this experience? Like that scenario there, how long had you been meditating?
About 3 years.
I know, I mean that day.
Oh, that day. Oh.
Yes. If you know, I'm just curious.
15 minutes.
Wow. And you got to that point?
Well, I think that the meditation over the years up to that point and the study at the years up to that point had kind of opened me up to it. I
Okay.
also happen to be a reincarnationist. A lot of pagans are.
Can you
Not
still
all,
be
but a
that
lot.
though? Now
Pardon me?
that I'm sorry, I'm so ignorant. I want to say like you're an Egyptian pagan. Is that incorrect?
Yeah, Egyptian path.
Egyptian path. Okay. Um, and I'm guessing you can use a lot of this in your fantasy. I mean, it just seems
Oh,
like
yeah.
you could just take so much from this and add it to your novels.
Well, that's the thing. Just because I personally follow the Egyptian gods doesn't mean that I'm closed off to other mythologies.
Okay.
Because when I call on Anubis, um, okay, if Balder in the Norse pantheon is very equivalent to Horus in the Egyptian, equivalent to Apollo in the Greco-Roman, and even equivalent to Jesus in the Christian. They're all the template of the perfected man.
The like a prophet
Well, not a prophet.
or a Messiah would
Arch-
be Jesus, right?
yeah, archetypically, they are the template of the perfected man.
Okay.
A thing that you strive towards, even though you will never obtain it.
The paragon.
Because I'm sorry.
The paragon.
Yes, that's a good word.
Paragon.
You see, that's what the whole point of mysticism is it's a path towards that spiritual development, that reaching towards. The Buddha had a thing where he was speaking to a monk and the monk had been meditating for 20 years. And the Buddha said, well, what has that gained you? And he said, well, I can levitate across this river. And the Buddha said, you're a fool. You could have earned the money to go across the river on the ferry in one day.
Yeah.
But where that is missed is any ability what you may develop is a collateral thing. It happens, but it's to the side. And what you're really striving for is a greater understanding of self and a greater understanding of the universe around you.
Sort of like the path to enlightenment. Like I guess it's that same concept that every religion or belief system has. Like there's so much in common between all of them. Like for example, the paragon, right? For Buddha, it's enlightenment. For Christians, it's be like Jesus. For various religions or belief systems, there is something or someone that we are all supposed to aspire to, and that is based on, or it stems from the human need to aspire to something. We all need goals. We all need someone to look up to, something to work towards, and so that
something to pattern ourselves after.
Exactly. So the path, like you said, the Egyptian path, the Norse path, whatever the path is, it's still ultimately to the same goal, which is self-betterment, which is the same thing that every religion espouses in their own way.
Yes, every positive religion, every positive aspected branch of a religion reaches towards the same thing. It's just a matter of not all branches of a religion are that positively skewed. I mean, you have things like the Thuggies, which grew up in the out of the Hindu, and they went around killing people. You had the witch burnings of the Middle Ages, which my people consider the Holocaust. You know, for us, that's our Holocaust.
And now I'm guessing that a lot of, like you say, witches and pagans, most people sort of see them interchangeably. I assume that means that pagans were burned right alongside witches and called witches.
Yeah, well, basically, Wiccans are Wiccans are pagan by definition, but it's the same way. All Baptists are Christian,
but not all Christians.
But not all Christians are Baptist.
Got it. So pagan is the umbrella, and Wicca, Druidism, many more.
They're branches. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, and you know, depending, they're either more or less alike. Yes, little one, you're a good girl. I'm busy.
She jumped up there.
Yeah, she, the new addition to the family.
Well, I kind of wanted to jump into ghost busting before we got into the reading, and I was hoping maybe you could give the audience an idea of what that is, because obviously I'm going to say Ghostbusters, right? That's
Yeah,
what I think of.
no proton packs.
No proton backs,
Um,
but it seems like you have it worse because of you said before the podcast, these, can we say spirits or apparitions? What would you call it?
yeah. Well, spirits, there's the whole range of I'm confused, I can't find my way to the
Uh-huh.
door. Oh, you open the door for them and they go, yay, and run through. They're the easiest to deal with.
And then there are some that fight back.
There are some that fight back, and you really have to drag them or
And
negotiate with them.
and what can they do to
Have
you?
some entities. I mentioned before the travelers. You have another class of entity who don't live on this plane at all, or at least haven't for a very long time. And the negative skewed ones of those can be a heck of a fight. And that's where a lot of the lore of demons and Yare and so forth and goblins come from.
You said you've been given nausea and headaches. Is that the extent of it?
Nausea, headaches. There was one time I basically got knocked down to my knees because it felt like somebody had hit me in the head with an axe.
Holy crap!
My eyes were blurry for about 2 days afterwards. It happens in any kind of given conflict. You're dealing with a conflict. You're putting energy against energy. And now, admittedly, if you're incarnate, you have a home court advantage that's pretty hard to beat because we belong here. We have a body that supplies the energy needs for our spirit. Whereas if something is diving in without a body, it's more or less like it's jumping into water holding its breath. Because
so eventually it's got to come back up for air.
It's going to have to come up for air.
Is there like a general reason that these travelers come? Like, I know giving a warning message or something is a really popular trope in fantasy, but is there something real?
Well, that can be the case actually. If somebody loved you in life, they don't stop loving you just because they've gone to the other side. So if they have the ability, if they can muster the energy, and they see something bad coming your way, they may just come and try to help you. Sometimes, depending on how easy the transition is, they just want to hang. There's a tradition among the pagan peoples called the Dumb Supper, usually held around Samhain, which has been in the modern era called Halloween.
Yeah.
And it's considered the day that the veil between the worlds is at its thinnest. And you'll basically cast a magic circle, have everybody sit with a plate, 2 plates, and a token amount of food. You tear some of the food off and place it in the plate opposite you. You put a little in your own plate. And whoever has mediumship abilities will try to open a channel so that you can visit with a loved one for a few minutes.
Interesting.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
My first one is, what if you lose while you're ghost busting? Is it possible to lose, and what could happen?
It is possible to lose, and that depends on how badly you lose. It can be the thing of you get burnt out, you lose whatever abilities you have won through hard study. They may or may not come back. It can actually go to the point of manifesting physical physical injuries. I dealt with a poltergeist case once where, I did not get injured myself. The girl that the poltergeist was drawing energy from was getting these horrible scratches all over her body. You get physical manifestations. And while I don't know anybody it's happened to personally, I have heard that you can have it can result in death if the situation is bad enough. But these are far more the exception. I mean, the vast majority of it is relatively simple. It's the poor bugger who got stuck and didn't go into the light and is willing to go across fairly readily. And as I said, you have a home court advantage being here.
And my second question is, if the one that really freaks me out is the one you said doesn't even live on this plane. Can it take you back? Can it take your soul back to its plane?
No.
Okay.
It's getting into the law of attraction, of like attracting like.
Okay.
And vibrationally speaking, you are going to, when you buy it, when your physical body no longer functions, your spiritual aspect will be drawn to the level of the astral plane that corresponds to it. So you end up with a bunch of people at your same moral level. Now, whether that's something to shudder and hide from or something that you're going to embrace happily, that's your own decision to make. But
and do people pay you to do this?
No, I don't accept money for that kind of work. I accept money for readings. I'm very good with the tarot. I'm very good with Norse runes. But the kind of spiritual work, I don't accept money for. I'm sorry?
I thought I remember hearing from a Wiccan friend of mine, or from some random comment somewhere, that accepting money for doing something like that would make it like the dark use of the powers. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that's something that I thought I remember hearing.
That there is that view with some people. It's a matter of, I think it's a very personal thing. I just never felt comfortable taking money to do that kind of work.
Because I thought, I from what I understand, it's sort of like the emotion that you put out into the world, or you put into the spell or the ritual or whatever, that's sort of what is manifested. So if you're doing something with a self-centered emotion, you're doing it for money to earn, for benefiting yourself, then it won't have the desired effect. Now, this may be totally off base, but
no, there's nothing wrong with accepting something for yourself.
Okay.
I just never felt comfortable doing it because, as I said, the majority of the work is kind of going in and saying, oh, you're lost. Here's the roadmap. You just go here, 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 and here, and you'll get where you're going.
Okay.
Would you charge somebody money for giving the directions on the street?
Oh, okay. That was good. Yeah, that makes sense to me. It just seems like it might be a burden on you because you're putting your life in danger almost, or you're...
Well, not on the minor stuff.
Not on the minor stuff. Okay. And
on
you
the
can
knockdown, drag out guys, it's a bit, but they're very much the exception. And frankly, I've only had one incident that I felt that I was in over my depth.
And what did you do?
I won.
Oh, that's good. That's awesome. Should we get into the reading, or do you guys want to continue this?
I'm good either way.
Andy, I'll leave it up to you, man.
Whatever you want, man.
Stephen, being on the podcast is, it could be a time for you to sell books, or would you rather just talk more about your experiences? Because
why don't I do more reading? Because the reading incorporates fictionalized view of something that can happen. And
let's do it then, man. Yeah. That sounds good to me.
I use fictionalized versions of a lot of my experiences. And one thing I will say is, in one of my other novels, Nuki Kubai, I actually give a very nice little spiel about how mysticism works.
Mm-hmm. See, yours is better. I'm actually really good about writing characters who are awkward with girls because when I was younger, I was super awkward, but confident enough to go talk to these girls, and it was always terrible, just horrible. And so, like, I write that into my books because I know about it. And I just wrote a character who is like me when I was younger, but this guy never learns. You know, he's just constantly a strange dude. So I know what you mean about, you know, writing your experiences. And he's also he is a paid assassin. That's why he does so well.
Absolutely, it's why I've done.
Yeah, that's why he's doing so well right now.
Okay. This is from Horn of the Kraken, and it's the introduction of Sigurlinna, and she is at Sethkona, and Sethkona are a form of necromantic witch. They deal in death magic.
Oh.
But that is not as onerous as you might think it is, because death is a natural part of the cycle, and it's not necessarily evil. Often it's just helping spirits across.
Is Andy, do you want to do the narration? Because it seems like there's a lot of words that you probably pronounce better than I.
Sure.
Steven, are there any characters you'd like me to play or that you want to play?
Why don't you do the ghosts?
Okay, is it a female?
Oh, there's several. How? Well, would you like me to do the narration and you guys do the speaking parts?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Andy?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Steve, you do the woman's voice, and I'll do the rest.
Sounds good.
Okay. Sigurlinna trudged through the dark and cold, a heavy burden of wood on her back, and a cargo more precious than gold in her hands. The forest around her was dead. Trees towered, stark skeletons against the vermilion light that tainted the horizon from Muspelheim's flames. She could barely see her own tracks in the snow in front of her. Oh, are you guys getting that feedback?
Yes. Andy, are you?
I definitely am hearing it.
Okay. It was adding to the creepiness of the story.
Okay, I think it was just too close to speaker. Okay.
Okay. There we go. Yeah, it's better.
She could barely see her own tracks in the snow in front of her.
You're going the wrong way. Let me in and I'll show you.
Spoke a voice in her ear that she tried to ignore.
Don't listen to him. He doesn't want to help you. Why don't you stop and rest, dear? I could keep you warm if you'd let me enter you.
Spoke a woman's voice.
Be silent, Shades. I am not fool enough to listen to you.
Over here, a fat buck ready for the taking. I was a hunter. I could get him for you.
Called yet another voice. Sigurlinna stepped into a clearing before a snow-covered mound. A spot of light spilled out, staining the snow with dancing red waves.
She will die soon, and then she won't be able to protect you. You'll let us in, and then you can wander the darkness.
Snarled the female voice. Sigurlinna trudged to the opening in the mound and stooped to enter. Inside, the chamber widened into two long passages, defined by large stone slabs roughly chiseled flat. Side chambers were sealed off with walls of smaller stones. A fire burnt in the middle of a clear space at the front of the passage, with a tripod over the flames. Wood was piled at the back of the passage. A mound of poorly tanned hides filled the space between the fire and the wood. The transparent form of a muscular man in his middle years, dressed in mail and girthed with a sword, stood by the mound of hides.
I am sorry, my little cat, but no. I welcome you here because you are my granddaughter. I held you on my knee when you were in swaddling, and now you are close to death. Sigurlinna is too far, both in kinship and in her time of mortal life, for me to extend my courtesy. This is a house for the dead. The living do not belong here.
I'm standing right here, great-great-grandfather.
So you are, distant daughter of my line.
Ignoring the spirit, Sigurlina held up the 2 trout in her hand and moved beside the pile of hides.
I was able to break a hole in the ice and retrieve my line.
That is wonderful, dear.
A hand that was age-spotted skin stretched tight over bone emerged from the hides and stroked Sigurlina's cheek. Sigurlina closed her eyes and smiled. A wolf's howl pierced the eternal night, and even the dead warrior trembled in fear.
Graham howls, the sword age is begun.
A crazy-haired old woman in dirty clothing flew through the rocks, barring a side chamber.
We are all Sith Connor here. We all know the hell hounds call.
The aged figure from the hides spoke in a frail voice. The crazy-haired shade dove towards Sigurlina. The girl's body jerked and her features sneered.
Then we all know there is no hope. The sword age will give way to the wolf age, and none will be spared.
Spoke the shade's voice through Sigurlina's lips.
Silence, Katya, and get out of my descendant. I will not see my mortal line end while Odin still stands, and I yet rule in this house.
Snapped the warrior shade. Sigurlina collapsed to hands and knees while the shade of Katya manifested beside her.
Useless, weak thing. No control. If you had the courage to follow Laufey, she'd teach you control, and then no shade could treat you thus.
Be silent, Katya. You're just jealous because I chose Freya. She's at least able to keep her man.
Snapped Sigurlina's grandmother's voice. Then she fell into a fit of coughing. Sigurlina roused herself and moved to comfort the old woman, who waved her away.
Prepare the fish, and be sure to make offering to our hosts,
instructed the aged voice from piled hides. The task of preparing the fish steadied Sigurlina's nerves. Spirits crowded about the flames, jabbering at her. Many she could invite in or push away, but not the powerful ones. Her grandmother had saved her dozens of times from spirits that entered and wouldn't leave. And Sigurlina was afraid of what would happen without the old woman. She made sure to put the bones and fish heads in the fire to carry them to the other world. This stilled the shades for a moment while they all vied for their share of the offering, like hungry wolves tearing at a kill. When the food was ready, she scooped it into her wooden bowl and moved to her grandmother's side. Milky eyes opened on a weathered face.
You eat it, dear. I do not need it.
Grandmother. Oh.
Grandmother.
An aged hand rose, silencing the protest.
This will be my last night in mortal flesh.
Sigurlina felt her throat close on her words. The aged face smiled gently.
I should have passed when the axe age began. Would have. But after the bastard Hakon slaughtered your mother, someone had to teach you the way of safe magic.
Sigurlina felt her thoughts drawn back. She had been but 12 when Hakon's crusaders came to their village, calling for all to bend knee to their white god. They had accepted hospitality, but in the dead of night they betrayed their hosts. Half the men were dead, throats slit in their sleep, before the alarm was raised. The crusaders' swords dripping blood herded the men into the town's common. They were so arrogant. They thought nothing of the women. With a cry, the shield maids fell upon them, armed and ready. The men escaped in the confusion and ran to armor themselves as their wives, mothers, and daughters held the foe at bay. Sigurlina hung her head as she remembered seeing her own mother, a Sethkona of great power, standing in their doorway, warping the spirits to bring the invaders down. Then a feathered shaft struck her, and she fell. Her father, now armed, had rushed to his wife's side and held her as she breathed her last.
Run free.
It was the first time Sigurlina had heard a spirit's voice. She looked up and saw her mother floating before her, but she could see the hut's wall through her.
Mother, teach her.
The spirit smiled at Sigurlina.
My little Seth Connor. I will.
Agreed her mother, and then her mother was gone. Her grandmother, then her mother was gone.
We must get to the docks.
Snapped her father as he picked up his beloved and lay her on their bed. He kissed her a final time, taking a brand from the fire. He thrust it into the straw mattress.
A fitting pyre,
said grandmother.
They won't despoil her in death.
Her father grunted. They raced from cover to cover, her father striking down the enemies they couldn't avoid, while her grandmother cast shroud spells, turning the crusaders' eyes away from them. At the dock, her father joined the warriors who held back the crusaders, while the village folk boarded the ships. Blood flowed, and Sigurlina watched from her ship, fascinated as Valkyries carried the fallen away. She heard her father's voice commanding.
Cast off! Cast off!
Crying, she tried to run to him, but aged hands with an iron grip held her back. 3 crusaders rushed her father, who held the dock. He parried a blow, and his notched sword broke. They bore him down. The last thing she saw was his transparent form mounting a Valkyrie's horse. After that, it had been an arduous journey to Finnmark, the land of her grandmother, where the only shelter or generosity they could find was with the dead. Sigurlina shook all over.
You can't die. I can't control the spirits. I'm not strong enough. I still need to learn.
You must listen.
Her grandmother's voice barred no objection. Sigurlina nodded. The old woman seemed to sink into the hides, and her voice was a whisper.
When I am gone, you alone can avenge our family. Hakon must not be permitted to slaughter and force his ways on our people. Swear to me that you will avenge us.
I swear.
Sigurlina's voice was tear-choked.
Good. When I am gone, you must make a pyre. Burn my body and keep the flames going for 3 days. Use the motion of the stars to keep your time. When that is done, sift the ashes, and you will find all you need.
Sigurlina hugged the old woman, then released her and devoured the fish. For the first time in days, the gnawing in her belly stilled. Exhausted, she slept by the fire.
Sigurlina, wake up, dear.
Sigurlina opened her eyes and stared at her mother. Only it wasn't her mother. The eyes were different. They were blue, and her mother's had been green, and the jaw was more square.
Grandmother?
Always so vain, Freya lover,
Snarled Caitl's shade.
Be quiet, you old bat.
Replied the grandmother's shade. She turned to Sigurlina.
Remember.
Sigurlina sat up and shivered. The fire had burnt down to coals. She moved to add more wood.
Let it die,
commanded the shade of the warrior.
Great-great-grandfather Jarl Ingvar.
Sigurlina looked into the shade's hollow eyes and pale corpse-like face, then fell silent.
This is a house for the dead. You are not welcome here.
Or you could let me take your form and stay.
Breathed Caitl's voice.
Leave,
commanded Ingvar.
I'll gather my things and set the pyre, then...
I said leave!
Bellowed Ingvar, and dust fell from the ceiling. Sigurlina faced her ancestor, and her heart quailed. Then her eyes fell to the still pile of hides on the floor, and something hard gripped her.
No.
No! This is... Oh,
It's fine.
This
is my house. I rule here.
Bellowed Ingvar. More dust fell.
I am Seth Kona, Shade. I will take what is mine and do what I have promised before I depart. This may be your house, but I am Seth Kona.
Ingavar backed away, his features taking on the appearance of the vital man he'd been in life. He smiled and nodded.
Very well, daughter of my line.
Sigurlina swallowed in a dry mouth. Never before had a powerful spirit showed her deference. Taking an armload of wood from her store, she built up the fire before starting the arduous process of building the pyre in the clearing before the barrow. Hours later, she pulled away the layers of hides from around her grandmother's body. The shades had been oddly silent as she worked. When her grandmother's corpse was revealed, it was a wizened, desiccated shell. Nothing of the vital force that had played such a role in her life remained. Sigurlina picked up the corpse, bore it outside, and laid it on the piled wood. The shades from the barrow appeared beside her, forming a ring.
No one should do this alone,
Explained Ingavar, who stood beside her. She nodded, then went back to the barrow, pulling her meager possessions outside the entrance. She used a stick to push flaming coals from her fire into the empty cauldron and carried them out to the set wood.
May Freya watch over you. Goodbye, grandmother.
Tipping the cauldron, she dropped the coals into the dry wood. The flame took and roared up. She stood surrounded by the dead, in service to the dead, for a long time.
Very nice. Very nice. So, Andy, I know you need to get going. It's getting late. First of all, I just want to say you really breathed life into that reading. That was awesome. Great job. Andy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if you're still there.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, Stephen Pearl, we have to sign off now because it is getting pretty late. Do you want to just let everyone know where they can find your books?
Okay, easiest one is www.stephenpearl.com.
Awesome. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
But that's my website, and you can get links through my Amazon page there where you can buy the books.
Yes,
Awesome.
and search Stephen B. Pearl on Amazon to get his books. Stephen, thank you so much for being on the air with us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and end this podcast since it is so late. We really appreciate you, man, and we want to have you back because we did not cover everything about mysticism. I have so many questions, so I'd love to have you back. Thank you very much for being on the air with us.
No, thank you for having me, and I'd be very happy to come back.
And thank you very much for making this episode 69 so special. All right, with that, I'm going to end the podcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and watching. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. That helps us out tremendously. We love you all, and we hope you have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
Good night.